What I have said is this, that I now have 29 experts that have written several reports on and have seen all the documentation. If they ever want to see them, if they ever want to read them, then my door is always open. There will be no publicity. I will not be present. I'll have a neonatologist sit down with them and go through the reports of what went wrong with them to establish the truth.
And so I remember as you were talking, like all sorts of things were going off in me. I was sort of thinking about the families and that offer that you're making, which is, really important. And again, back to, you really wouldn't do this if you thought she was guilty. And I've spent enough time in prisons now. I've been going into prison since 2009 that, most people in prison at some point eventually will say, I did do it in some form or other. So it's a very small proportion of people that will protest innocence and then go as far as the chap that you talked about who was going over the papers, at night in his cell. It's a very small. It's not like every person that goes to prison is saying, I shouldn't be here, I'm innocent. Most people are sort of like, did the crime, do the time.
Yeah, and
Um,
do the rehabilitation courses and all the rest of
yeah.
it and engage with probation services. But there are, those that have been wrongly convicted. And as I say, I've looked at, with the Innocence Project that I set up, some of them came to me and I looked at them and I just thought, no, there's nothing in this.
Mm.
There's a lot of evidence that you're guilty. And so I've closed the file and walked away. So, there's just very few that I work on, day in, day out, that are genuine cases of innocence.
Absolutely. And then I moved on, and as you were talking, and I suddenly got to. So part of the problem though is that you use the word adversarial, and lots of the way we operate in society is rooted in adversarial processes. Disciplinary and grievance procedures in workplaces, because at the end of the day, you take something like the NHS, it's a gigantic workplace. You take schools, they're gigantic workplaces. And you realise that we we seem to, I find the words for this as a society, you kind of got to protect yourself, haven't you? If you're working somewhere, because these hierarchical systems can rain down on you if you don't toe the line, if you don't go with the mood or the flow. And so there's something about what you're opening up, which of course we've seen with things like the post office and Windrush and Grenfell and all those other things that we could name. For me, we've got to stop calling them scandals because they're not scandals. Scandals implies it's a one-off. But it seems to be in all of these institutions. And then when you look at the humorous side, like you go back to that series, Yes, Minister, and we look at and say, but something needs to change in our institutions. I know that in the NHS they do try. There is a sort of policy to try, and when mistakes happen, to see what's the learning and how can we do better next time. I know that's built in, and yet I see how difficult that is when you can be vilified, easily. And you display a huge amount of courage. I mean, I think I've got probably a fraction of your courage. I would love to be where you are in the world. Um, but there's something in the institutions that breeds this problem. How would you respond to that?
I think there's systemic failings across the whole of our institutions. There are problems at each of it. I see it almost on a daily basis. And I don't think that there's an acceptance to really admit it and realize that there's a problem. and I think it's across the board. I think it's in politics. I think it's in local authorities. I think it's in the social services. Um, and it could be one of the big problems is it could be that people are overworked, people are tired, people don't have time, people are not paid enough money to do the job properly. It could be that as I said before, failure to accept by some institutions that actually there's real fundamental issues with the way that the structure is operating. I focus on the Criminal Court of Appeal and with the CCRC. Both institutions, I think, over the years have been found wanting. Both the institutions, I think, have failed innocent people. I think that there are innocent people in our prison that have been both before the CCRC and the Court of Appeal and have been let down by them and are still in prison and will die in prison as a result. And how we have to expose it. We have to open the lid on it. We have to realize that our systems simply don't work, are not fit for purpose when it comes to, and I speak only when it comes to miscarriages of justice.